Also joining us is Board President Jim Richards. And our agenda this evening is to talk about bonding, end of the year, fiscal adjustments, school building aid, food service, and the impact of debt on tax rates. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Dunn to begin.
All right, thank you. Hopefully this meeting is not too long. It's supposed to be informational and get a little direction from you folks. So I'll start off with the big issue first. One thing I will do back up is if you look under the Finance Committee, one of the last items, it says, and to recommend bonding for capital improvements as needed. So that's why I come to you tonight to start that discussion.
Thank you.
So I will start off with bonding and HVAC. You may remember during the budget process, we had talked about upgrading HVAC systems. Broken ground is already set. We are using ESSER funds with that, and that will happen next summer of '24. They will do preliminary work this summer because of the backlog and the supply chain as it relates to electrical, because there's a transformer that needs to be upgraded, and it has about a 40 to 52 week lead time. So that one is all set from a funding standpoint. The other one we had looked at is Beaver Meadow and the high school. So I just paid $214,000 in bills from Train. All of this is for repairs and trying to keep these buildings running. The COVID and running those units that were already 30 years old has really worn them down. And you might have heard that at the Capital Facilities Committee meeting. So, I mean, you're at Beaver Meadow that is 30 plus years old. That building was built in '87. It had an addition and upgrade, I believe, in the early '90s. But that system has aged as well. So, and then the high school, which has really given us a pretty big fit also. But obviously when you look at what's coming down the pike as it relates to the middle school and what these are, the elementaries are a little bit smaller. The high school alone, the estimate is $22 million just to do the HVAC at the high school. So what we're going to do is kind of cherry pick that one, and we went after the air handlers of the about 16 to 18 air handlers that are up there. We cherry picked and went after the ones that are causing the biggest problems, including ones that when you hit the winter, when you have people going up there and manually restarting them because they're just not holding up. So
you're talking about doing 16 to 18 total, or cherry picking out of 16 to 18?
Out of the total that they have, only cherry picking about 4 or 5. If we can get a sixth, we'll try to get a sixth. And I'll explain a little bit about that.
Jack, had we talked at one point about putting these together and bonding
All of it, yeah.
all of it, right?
So what I had internally had talked to our folks about is when you did the middle school, maybe we'd try to add on to the high school. But if we can at least pick a little bit of it now, because the middle school is probably at least 2 years away from any type of significant bond to borrow, I mean at a minimum, that's kind of, so I can at least break it up a little bit. That was the thought. And again, the other concern is spending all this money now and it all aging at the same time. And that's good and bad,
Right.
you know, as we've seen over the last couple of years. So,
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
So if we're gonna do 4 to 5, maybe 6 out of 16 to 18,
Mm-hmm.
we will be able to take advantage of the phenomenal improvements in technology that have occurred with regards to this and still be able to do it, like, you know, mostly in controls
Right.
and all, and then just add on the remaining 12, 10, whatever.
Yeah, so the plan is,
Just
as Matt has been wanting to do, is build them with dehumidified air, which is what the 3 elementary schools have. So when we look at the high school, it's likely we would put the units in, but we couldn't turn it on because there's going to be such an imbalance in the building because it's not engineered. It would be engineered for all of them to be on and be able to have that. Otherwise, you're going to put too much stress on the units. But they will be more efficient units than these 30-year-olds, but we just won't turn on the dehumidified air until all the units would be replaced.
But
But
the
they'd already be
con-
outfitted and ready to go.
The control and diagnostics, though, will be state-of-the-art
Yeah.
and add the other ones in, because that really can help you with efficiency as well as diagnosing any issues.
Yep.
Okay.
And we're doing some of
Just to
them
make sure we're not-
upgrades now. As part of the ESSER, we upgraded the controls to be able to create better access through the web and get a tighter overview of the buildings, especially since some of the infrastructure is aging out. So the main boxes are being replaced at actually all 7 schools. So,
Mr. Cotton, and then Mr.
Um,
Croteau.
I just wanted clarification, the 22 million you mentioned for the high school, that's for the 16 or 18?
that's to replace everything.
To do
and
everything.
hook up the
Okay.
humidified air,
But we're,
upgrade
but
the
we're
electric.
talking now about 4 or 5,
Correct.
okay.
So I have those numbers for you.
Mr. Croteau?
Thank you. So many times in the past, we've seen where, especially when it comes to technology, we do things thinking ahead of time, and then by the time we actually get to do them, things can be obsolete or nearing obsolete. What's your thought about putting the capacity for dehumidified air in those units now with who knows when down the road we're gonna be able to get to the remaining HVAC units? Or do you have an idea of when down the road that would be,
No,
given that we have a middle school?
I think the big thing would be try to do it when we borrow for the Runlet project,
Okay,
and then team them up and have them do everything.
so then we're talking about
2 to 4
a couple
years.
of 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about your logic in terms of the difference between bonding this now as the high school separately versus rolling it into the middle school project? It's going to be a similar amount of debt that we would have to ask taxpayers to go forward with. So if we're going to bond to do Beaver Meadow and part of the high school, and then 2 years from now, bond, I assume we're talking about 2 years from now, hopefully, bond to do Runlet and the high school, and we'll also have capacity issues with our facility staff overseeing Runlet. Like, why does that make better financial sense?
Just because of the sheer size of the bond in a couple of years, and I'm seeing the bills come in for items that are old.
Yeah.
And we have put amount of money into people and haven't put it into buildings. That's frankly,
No.
What it is.
What I'm saying
Yeah.
is, explain to me why waiting to bond as opposed to doing the high school in Beaver Meadow now?
all of it now?
Right. Like, what would be the potential cost savings on a bond versus doing it now?
Well, I kind of look back, it's the sheer size of the project and getting the best rate and the best bond premium holiday and the best interest rate that we could. And also, I'm trying to get through on getting this because there's going to be a hybrid of money from what's left over from ESSER and trying to say, let's get at least some of this stuff out of the way. And when we do the big project, which is really going to attract, to me, investors. I mean, it's similar when we did the elementary school. That project was originally to do 10 years and do one school per year, per section, and it was going to take 10 years. But the economies of scale with doing it all at the same time made it worthwhile. The reason I don't see it now is just because this equipment is so beat up. I don't know how much
Well,
more we
and
put
my
into
question
it.
is,
Yeah.
like, are we gonna spend repairing the other air handlers over the next 3 or 4 years what we would spend
Sure.
on doing the bond
Yeah.
now? And so should we consider going forward with all of it, which would improve the conditions in the school for the staff and everybody, and we could turn on the system and save on those bills? And that's really a
Yep.
question of what is the financial difference in bonding
All of it.
all of the high school in Beaver Meadow now, especially compared to what we'll pay to repair.
Sure.
Mr. Patton?
I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, and in past experience, the larger the bond, the better the rate, usually.
depending on our,
all else being equal.
yeah.
So, splitting it into two pieces, I think, we're not gonna have as large a bond to do this HVAC stuff now. So you're gonna have a higher rate than you would 2 years from now. And plus, I mean, you never know, but interest rates are higher now than they have been,
Right.
so.
So Jack, what was the lead time on broken ground again?
It's next summer.
Yeah,
It was
but when
40 to
did you put in
52
the
weeks for the transformer.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
was it how many months?
40 to 52 weeks.
40
It's
to
almost a
52
year.
weeks.
So a year.
full
Just for the
year.
transformer, yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, if you do it now, will it be going in about the time we're deciding on, do we pay advance, do we pay, I'm just
Well,
looking at timing.
Yeah, and it's the discussion we're having with the middle school, depending on where that gets plopped in timing. Do we buy any HVAC, renting a warehouse and storing roofing materials, HVAC material, all that stuff we need to determine. And if it's all done through that same vendor, I'm just thinking you're gonna get a much better price and a much better deal by doing it all in one shot. But right now, I'm just trying to get through. That's really what it is. I mean, if I was in a luxury of saying, hey, we have 5 more years of life left, I would consider waiting, but this stuff's been punted so far down the road, it's done.
Ms. Hastings and then Mr. Croteau.
What do you think the chances are that these systems at the high school would fail before the 2 or 3 years would come up? And that we would end up having to do this,
You mean the units we're looking to replace?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're already failing now.
all 16 to 18 are failing?
Well, we've taken the worst of them, but they're all
Okay.
the same vintage.
Right, so we're gonna replace 4, maybe 5, and then we're still gonna have 11 or 12 that could fail at any time.
Yep.
I'm not sure it makes sense to wait, but.
I'd like to see if you
Right.
could run the numbers
Yeah.
and whether there's options where we could move ahead with the project and still roll it into a later bond, whether we would have the cash facility to do some of that or bond anticipation notes.
I was just gonna say, we
Yeah.
could go down that path, which is on this page. So part of the other piece, which we did do 10 years ago, we did a bond anticipation note and did about 5 million and then rolled that into a bond. So I could do a short-term note and borrow for Beaver Meadow and the high school, and then in 2 years you roll that into a bigger bond. That you could do, and those interest rates are fairly inexpensive. And I can look at that scenario, and that's still a scenario that may be coming to you in the next couple of months as we start to look at the run portion of it. Because as a municipality, you have a variety of different options to be able to do this, which is fantastic because the tools that you have available to you to fund this is great, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than having to do some type of lease. This is the best way to go. But I can look at that, sure. And
Yeah, I think of the options I've heard, I mean, a bond anticipation note and then roll it all into the big one in 2 or 3 years makes a lot of sense.
now the other thing, obviously we can't afford the 22 million portion. The other thing, if you're open to that, is we could prepay the Beaver Meadow and reimburse ourselves. Because that one's only 3.5 million, and you have enough in your trust fund, you could prepay that and then put the money back in.
And what's the advantage of that?
Well,
Aside-
one, I can lock in now and set it up for next summer, which I'm trying to blow up Broken Ground and Beaver Meadow next summer. That's what we're trying to do. Fortunately too, we were able to get the utility company to pick up the cost of the transformer to go into Beaver Meadow. So that we've signed off on in anticipation that, yep, we're gonna be upgrading in the next year. I mean, we know, based on bills, we have to do something. It's just a matter of what's the funding mechanism that you'd like to have me explore.
And do we think if we, as a board, decided to go ahead with all of the high school, there would be, we would be able to do that next year, or are we talking about a 2-year lead time?
Yeah,
with
it's gonna need a longer lead time.
Okay.
They got some engineering they still need to do to design it. They've done enough to be able to focus, based on our history, the bills, how much we're spending, the units that are causing us the biggest amount of problem. That's what we had them focus on. Just because looking at a 25 or $30 million bond, when we're trying to also plan a middle school, I thought was, maybe we
So
should
the-
space it.
The other side of that comment is that if we wait we're gonna compound our, we're gonna wait extra long for the process to happen and give more opportunity for more bills to pay for upgrade and upkeep.
And I don't know if a bond anticipation note, if they would do that large. I'd have to double check.
Well, if we prepaid the Beaver Meadow and paid ourselves back,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that
then
one's
we're
easy.
looking at a bond anticipation of 22 million to do the high school?
Would be 20.
Or would it, is that 22
Probably.
million minus,
No, minus 3.
it's
So
not
it's-
minus the 3, it's 22
Right,
just for the high school?
22 million just for the high school is the estimate we've been given. And that's
Can we
everything.
do a bond anticipation for 22 million?
I'd have to check
You're not
and
sure?
go that size.
That's what I
It
wasn't-
might be a max of 5 or 10 million. I don't know about 20 or 25 million, but yeah.
So, Jack, are we sizing this based on summer temperatures as they can be these years and
Well, hence the
anticipated to be?
Hence the dehumidified air.
Yeah, but for
Winning
use in
another
June and,
5 years.
Yeah, in 5 years.
Right.
yeah. June, no, maybe even June and July and August, but at least June and August
Yeah.
anticipation.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanna make
I
sure
mean, I
that
think
we're,
you gotta start thinking year-round school at some point, may come down the road.
You're very comfortable in your 3 schools that have the dehumidification. I mean, this past June wasn't a good example, but in
Mhm.
prior years, they've been very comfortable.
okay.
So, I mean, but, the weather is only the weather for this
Well.
whatever period of time.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that adding on modularly is a little easier now than it used to be if we ever got into a situation. I just don't wanna undersize it,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Sure.
and be penny wise and pound foolish.
Well, as we start to go through this analysis, like we had to with Beaver Meadow, they want to know, okay, the depth of the walls, what's the insulation that's in it, all that stuff is 30-some years old, so now they have to compensate for that. And if we plan on upgrading or doing any type of insulation, they have to factor those things in. So,
Thank you.
And I'm sure Ellen is on this, but are there any federal grants through the infrastructure bills that, with the Inflation Reduction Act, that are available for helping us? I mean, these are energy system upgrades. I assume the systems will be more efficient.
yep, and if we find something, we will. I mean, obviously, the biggest one was the ESSER, hence why
Yeah.
we want to do
Yeah.
the broken ground and take some prepaid discounts, do Beaver Meadow and whatever's left in ESSER 3 to help mitigate that. That one's the biggest one we want, because we'd like to blow up both of those next. But the high school, while we're there, can we eliminate some of that, just seeing what we're seeing at that building and what he has to deal with in the winter. So, but I can also do what the whole thing would be as well. Yep.
Do you see any downside in pre-funding the Beaver Meadow portion of this?
No, I don't see any doubt. We've done that before. And I'll talk about the steps that we'll go through, but I would have bond counsel write up the resolution. You'll have a public notice about that. It's a long process. It isn't like I come here one night, we do a 10-day notice and we're all set. It's usually about a 45-day process. But if we're doing a reimbursement, I have so much that I have to do it within, but I'd recommend that we look at doing that, just because this way we can get them out of the way, and then you can solely focus on the high school. Because it's not hurting you right now. I mean, granted, interest rates are pretty good, so we're earning our interest on, the 3.5–4% on that money versus the abysmal 0.24 that it was for a while, so that's helpful. But other than that, the reason you have that fund is to make it work for you, and it's a perfect opportunity to do that. Considering we know for the next 2 years, there's no significant, we're gonna have architectural fees and some engineering work to do, but we can work through that.
The only other thing that I guess comes into this, but we don't know in terms of what we're looking at bonding, is memorial fields. And just to keep that in the back of our heads, that we've agreed to this planning process with the city, and I assume that planning process will result in a plan next year that
Has a number associated with it.
that has a number
Yes.
associated with it, so that
Yep.
we should keep
Yep.
thinking about that. But my sense of the committee is that we would like to see a plan that moves the entire high school project forward and what that would mean, and also get a sense of what we're spending on upkeep to the current system, so we can understand
Sure.
what we're saving
Yeah.
too. And if we do that outside of Runlet, then all of the schools will have updated dehumidified air, right?
Yes.
With Beaver Meadow and
Yeah,
Broken
just
Ground
Runlet would be the only one that doesn't.
outside of Runlet,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Yep. Okay, all right, so I'll get you some plans and I'll show you one with Parsons Beaver Meadow to move that quicker than necessarily the high school, but we can do that, all right?
Okay, Jack, include in that analysis as a risk, what catastrophic failure of one of the
Yeah.
HVAC systems or multiple ones would be at the high school, what we would have to do to.
And one other thing I'll
And
note,
what it would
the
cost
numbers
us.
I'm showing you also includes, as you know, what that catastrophic failure is, the AC units in the server room at the high school. It includes 2 of those units. One is from '07 that it now has a leak in one of the coils. They're getting me a number to replace it. But probably to do that job is 70,000-80,000, but it's in the high school number.
Okay.
Because that also has a 36-week lead time. And I'm working with them on how we get them. And these units would be, one's 2007, one's 2013. I told them replace them both, bring them up to date, and I want them to talk to each other. Where this one is doing the work, that one starts to say, hey, I need assistance, it can jump over to that. The other thing is I work with the IT folks, we're going through servers, and we are getting rid of older servers, and then moving things to the cloud where it makes sense from a security standpoint and also access. And that's something we can talk about in another meeting in a non-public, because it relates to security and software and how we're doing those things right now.
Just one more thing, Jack, on, as you're doing this, looking at the whole high school, do look at the bond anticipation note route and see if we can do that. And whether it's, more expensive to do bigger numbers. So,
Yes, absolutely. I'll give you a couple different options.
When are we thinking we'll do Beaver Meadow? Is that next summer?
We're hoping to do that
Okay.
summer, yeah.
So, Jack, I just had one other thought pop into my head. You talked about possibly the bond anticipation not being able to give us that total amount of money that we need. Is there any way that we could self-fund part of that as well as the Beaver Meadow and then sort of make that number lower so that it would be approved, or?
I'd have to
Is
see
that
what the
just-
max is on a bond anticipation note, so.
So if we can't do it, then this committee would need to come back together and talk about, okay, now what?
Yeah, whether you do a permanent, you wanna pre-fund all the 5 and do that partial at the high school and then we reimburse ourselves, those kind of things.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple different options.
But I definitely, going back to Mr. Richards' point, I definitely think understanding what we're spending now to maintain the system, but also what the cost, and I think we all know the consequences of a catastrophic failure, but,
Yep.
because even if we have to take a bond that's more expensive, it may make more financial sense
Sure.
than the cost of repairs.
Yeah. And like I said, we've seen it significantly with what's going on. I mean, our vendor is up there pretty often. I said they practically live there. And just trying to keep these buildings going and the fresh air coming in the winter. This one was rough. So, okay. So we'll look at again, the bond anticipation note. Again, we do usually general obligation bonds. And the funding mechanism that we use is equal principal versus level debt, which is typically what you'd find in a mortgage. When you do a 15, 20, or 30 year, you have the same payment for the same amount of years. With the equal principal, our payment goes down every year. So that's the whole thing that makes up your debt differential, maintaining 5% of the debt in your general fund, and as your debt goes down, the difference between those two is what gives you the amount in your trust fund. And that was started back in 2005. And so 4 boards have maintained that. And that's what gives you the flexibility. It also is very, it's looked at very favorably by the bond ratings agencies as well, because you have some type of mitigation for your debt. Okay. So this is kind of the 11 steps that we go through. So again, this isn't like you make a recommendation and on the 10th we're getting money. It's a lengthy process, as far as authorizing the debt, and they're with us throughout this process. They use bond counsel and craft what your motions will look like. They're gonna ask specific things from us as far as what's earmarked for this, what it's for, what's the lifespan, and we have to prove out that those things. It's not like I can buy, say, a bus for, finance it for 30 years and it's 10 years. So, disclosures, legal review, legal documents, debt schedules. The city goes through this annually, so for us, we do this every couple of years. Not that, we're not habitual bonding. We usually, when we get the big projects where there's an advantage, like a big one was when we had the Concord steam go out of business. Still don't understand that home. 4 schools and it's not eligible for emergency building aid, but I don't. But we had to bond, and then when we did that, we wound up adding on, if you remember, buses, technology, because it's so much cheaper to do it then than if we were to go and do a lease payment, put it into the operating budget. We do a ratings call with Moody's, and then the bond council does a review. They issue to the market. We get competitive bids back. They make recommendations to us. You vote. They make a recommendation. You get to see them all, and then you vote to accept it. We sign off on it, and they wire money into our bank. So, 45, 60 days. Very similar to a mortgage process, but a little different. Okay. So I list here the scope of work of what will happen at each of those schools as it relates to the air handlers that are there. And right now there are 7 that are in that building. And this would be replacing all of them. The controls are being upgraded or being outfitted for this summer. And then they'll put the new, they're gonna pigtail all the electric and all that they need, have it prepped, and then next summer install. So there'll be a crane on site, everything.
Mr. Richard, I'm sorry.
I just wanna know if we're replacing all of the units, and the controls,
The controls are being done now.
are we going out for competitive bids?
We bought that through Esser, so we were able to sole source it because Train is our primary vendor for that.
So that's the reason we would be going with Train.
Yeah. Because when we get into multi-vendors, which we've learned about, you have to start creating a third-party box in between for the stuff to talk. So,
Because we're not replacing everything?
correct.
Okay. I just want to be very clear about that.
Yeah.
Because I want to get the best deal for the taxpayer as I possibly can. Thank you. I'll look, and I'm sure you'll give us
And
more
we're
information.
using their engineers to design all this. So it's all one package. We're not doing engineering firm and then breaking it out. But we don't have, it's all going through one. And Train was put in all the elementary schools, 10 years ago, and then it went into the high school, when we built that, and only had, 18 months to get it done. So they were part of that process. So that's Beaver Meadow, and then the scope of work for Concord High School, targeting the air handlers that are in most need.
If we decide to go through and do the entire high school, does the lead time change?
I will know when I ask that question. We were just looking at the timing of what things are out now, because this would be next summer, as of right now, just for this. We'll have to do the whole building and bringing in the amount of electric that needs to be upgraded. We just said, do we go with the minimum, because we're trying to use the ESSER funds in addition to the bond to try to make all this happen, so. So, as we said when we did the heating project, another thing we felt adding on to round it up to a $6 million bond would be to add some combination of buses to the amount of money that we're spending on transportation, one, and start to develop some type of hybrid of CDL required, get rid of our aging buses, which right now I think we have about 5 or 6 that are over 10 years, and we try to stay within that 10 years. But also, can we look at non-CDL buses and try to mitigate this $250 to $500 a day for transportation.
What's a 9+1?
I call it a 10 passenger, it's 9 passengers and 1 driver.
Okay.
I mean, I think that may be something we need to look at. I think we need to, and maybe we should just refer this to the Communications and Policy Committee. I think we need to think about who's driving these buses, what policies and trainings we require for them. Is it any coach? Is it any parent? Are we checking their driving records? Like, I think there's a lot of questions about who we're gonna let
Sure.
drive these buses with the liability that brings to us.
So I'm looking at this as 2 separate things.
Yep.
One would be putting buses at schools and let other people drive. This is solely transportation, running transportation.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my thought here,
Okay.
not to buy extra buses to
Okay.
sprinkle
Okay.
around the school.
Okay, so-
Sorry.
And Jack, you've considered electric buses or alternative fuel buses, but they're much more expensive, correct?
So right now, we are applying for a grant
Okay.
with Ellen's help. This is the second round of the EPA grant. The first one was targeting rural communities, and you could do minimum 1 up to 3. Those 2 communities got awarded that. The next round now is 15 to 25 buses. They allocate up to, with the charger and the bus, $396,000 per bus. So you can buy up to 15, minimum 15 buses you have to buy, with a max of 25. But what you can do is partner with your vendor, which ours is WC Cressy, because where we get our Thomas buses from. And if they have districts that wanna buy, it's that combination of 15. So for us, we likely wouldn't buy 15. We do, because we probably wanna start with 3 to 5 potentially, and see how that works out for us, because we gotta put the infrastructure up at the comm, so we would work with the folks up there. That's 1. 2, the average bus does about 55 miles a day for a route. These buses, about 125 miles in the warmer weather, about 80 miles in the winter weather, is what they'll get on a charge. So we have to factor those things in. These are likely not buses we will be losing for co-curricular buses down to, Manchester or Bedford or up north. We don't Penn, but we can only start to dabble in that, but we are going to apply. It's just a matter of how many will be. So that discussion is supposed to happen next week with Ellen and Terry Crotty, the transportation director.
Is there any opportunity to partner with the city?
On buses?
Yeah.
I don't think they run their own bus.
They don't
that
run their
cat-
own
I know, CAT runs their buses, I
natural
think,
gas
but
or propane.
I would
Yeah.
ask them if there was,
I think it's
I don't
only
know.
targeted for school buses, not.
and
public
so that's the
transportation.
thing I was concerned about, is that it's a
I'll
grant for
verify
school
that.
buses.
Yeah,
All right, I just wanna, because we are using the same facility for
Yeah.
buses, and I just wanna make sure they're in the loop.
they are. I mean,
Okay.
we talk with them as it relates, especially we've talked about dump trucks and, they're multi-ton vehicles and whether that's coming, but you see the technology's advancing so fast. But we're gonna have to dig a trench and get electric up to that facility and find a place where these things will charge, and so we need to work through that. But, you have to have the grant in by August, and the award, our understanding, is by October. Lead time on a diesel bus is 1 year, electric buses are 6 to 8 months.
Okay, I just wanted to check because for infrastructure, I'm sure the city is looking at electric vehicles that are not buses. That, we can partner with them and see if we can,
Sure.
spread the cost out, be more efficient in our cost spending.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? So that was what our thought was, to piggyback and do this, because I know that, some of these buses are aging out. So when we look at this combination of payment, and again, when you do a bond, you can do a variety of different, payment methods. So if we had a 15-year at 5.2 and a 10-year at 800,000, because we wouldn't wanna, we know the HVACs will be there longer than 15, but buses 10, which is reasonable. You'd be looking at a year 1 payment of about $588,000, almost $600,000. And you'd have those payments, and they'd fall off in different times. After 10 years, the portion of that's the bus would fall off at the end of 15. So they'll provide us with a whole bond schedule and everything. Interest rate conservatively, they've told us on this is about 3.25. If I were to do any type of lease or conventional financing, maybe 7-8%. Okay. So we'll put that plan together for you, come back, okay? So just some quick notes as far as FY23, and right now it's busy because we're getting ready to close everything down. We're hoping to close everything down Wednesday, and then Maureen will take the next 2 days and process the year end. We were hoping to run the last payroll today. I think it's all prepped. I think it'll be run tomorrow. That last payroll will be about $7.2 million, because that's where the balloon checks, that's all the last salary checks for all the professional staff, and the 26 pays for people get paid out. But the things that have impacted us at the end of the year, and you'll see this in July when we come, once we've right-sized everything, the nursing services have been significant. Transportation, significant, 600,000 right now projected over what we had budgeted, which was about 740,000. Repairs and maintenance, that's going to be probably close to 400,000 over. And then we'll have a tighter year-end balance at the end of July. So that's the high red stuff. But in some of the areas where tuition, we did okay as it relates to Deerfield, and some of the savings in some other areas as it relates to ins and outs. But transportation has been a challenge between having the bus drivers, and then also what we're thinking now is we need to get a different type of equipment, as we mentioned, the non-CDL. Kathleen and I were up at their barbecue on the last day of staff school, and we had talked about that, because you feel like you could get maybe people in the door without having to go through that lengthy CDL process, but you get them through the process to be able to run a non-CDL and then graduate them into a CDL. Plus, we might be able to take care of some of these 1, 2, 3 offs without having to use an outside company, which is more expensive, because we only have one non-CDL bus. That's it. And we have 26 big buses and 12 small buses. They're all CDL required. So here's my utility.
Jack, we had seen it earlier at a full board meeting, staff costs were up.
You mean for absenteeism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that not an unexpected, or it's not listed here as?
Yeah, so right now, like our call-in subs is negative 147,000, so we used 412,000 there, and we spent, projected 322,000 for permanent subs, so just to cover absences, almost over $700,000.
And that's just teacher absences, because we don't cover,
Well, it could be
assistant.
nursing too.
Nursing, but it's not paraprofessional staff, because we don't
There could
typically.
be some of those in
Okay.
there. We try not to, but sometimes you get a one-on-one and they need somebody, they will. But you might see that some of the contracted service, where if we don't have somebody, we have to call somebody in.
Okay.
Okay. And we can get you a breakdown of that by grouping. So when I go into FY24, when I look at the nursing, I anticipate that continuing. It's definitely much bigger than pre-COVID. Again, the transportation costs, some of the energy, our gas is up in December, so I'm starting to bid that out now. Our consultant has said it's gonna be bad, so we're trying to get ahead of it. And then obviously the repairs and maintenance I mentioned, and then food service. Now you're gonna see food service, which is rough now, but it doesn't impact your budget because of the year-end balance that you have, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you'll see what it looks like.
Jack, can you tell us just a little more about what nursing services increase is all about?
The fragile needs of students and having to bring one-on-one nurses in, whether it's LNAs or RNs.
So these are unanticipated needs, right?
Yeah, 'cause once they
Like-
put in,
Like some of our transportation is unanticipated as
You might
well.
even have a nurse riding with a kid.
Yep.
And insurance companies for these families don't cover any of the
Well, if they have
educational?
Medicaid and they hit certain limits, we can submit for those,
Okay.
but
But if they're not,
not necessarily all of them are. Do we have a Medicaid for every one of them? I can't say that we do, but we can find out.
So Jack, just to be clear, these are special needs, not COVID needs that are just carrying over,
Correct.
because most of the COVID needs are gone.
Right.
Okay, thank
You know, it isn't always particularly challenging, medically fragile. Could be the diabetes. We've seen an increase, and, you know, some of them are young. They're K1-2s, and you can't leave them.
no,
You have to have somebody with them to monitor that. Every time, you know, we see that fluctuate depending on what they've eaten, but also when they're out to recess, they come back in, it'll drop, skyrocket, so we've had to have people with them, so that's what I've seen more of.
yeah.
And some of the medical conditions are pretty intense, I mean, tube feeding and, you know, the whole, you know.
Yeah, I'm surprised that insurance companies, if you have private insurance, don't help with that somewhat, knowing that the children need somebody with them. But I guess they don't. It's totally on the families and the schools.
Okay, and then I wanted the positive thing here. It appear, the state has, the governor and the legislature have passed an increase in the adequacy. So projected for us, looks like, this in the final, this was the estimate based on the current law and then the revised law using, prior numbers. Once they upgrade the free and reduced numbers and the average daily membership, then we'll get what our true entitlement will be. But if you apply it now, we anticipate 5 million more this October.
Then we budgeted.
Did not budget this.
So 5 million more than we budgeted.
That's
I
correct.
think this
The number we budget is that 21,940,156, because that's current law. Now remember, and I noted down the bottom, we took the risk of using your trust funds in anticipation, because at the time, we were thinking maybe 3.8 million. But it's gonna be more than that. But based on, we have to put 2.4 back into your trusts, and then that'll be an operating, and that leaves 2.5 available. Now, again, when you start looking at those bond payments, that's helpful, and any type of relief you wanted to give. But obviously, this is good for 2 years. And we'll see what the final number is. They'll send us, as they told us over the Zoom call in July, what they had expected. But you will have to appropriate that money in your October meeting for when you finalize your budget. Okay. So it's not a bad place to be in, but it's how do you balance it that, you know, you drop that whole thing 2.5, your extra next year is only 713. So you artificially lower it. And you have staff salaries, you know, you're close to 9% on health insurance increases. We'll see what New Hampshire retirement does. But either way, it's a good thing. We'll see how things go. Okay? And then, as Kathleen had noted, the school building aid process, on August 2nd, Amy Clark will be here. But the big thing she highlighted to us is the change in the process with HB 452. But I note here in that bill that it will not impact us that are already on the list, which is good. And she'll go through what that new process will be for the future. But at least we've gotten in line, and now it's a matter of money. But we know we're at least 2 years away. Okay. And then food service. So This is the raw numbers for food service right now. That does not include the May or June claims, because the state shuts off their reimbursement system on about the 3rd or the 5th. Shows, I think it's the first week of June. So we won't see those reimbursements or book that stuff until over the next couple days on what we anticipate we're gonna get, because we've already submitted, but they're not cutting checks to give us the money yet. But as of right now, the food service is negative 681,000. So you can see that they're projected at 2.4 million, and revenue is 1.7 million for 681. But again, I don't have the May claim in there and the June claim in there. That may be about another 150,000. And then you're gonna see what student debt is, which is up significantly prior to pre-pandemic. The good part is, if you remember, because during the pandemic, meals were free, we had a $1.2 million surplus. We're allowed to use that surplus to cover this. So basically half that surplus is probably
But not
gonna be
the
gone.
student debt, right?
Correct, you cannot cover student debt, and that's where I'll be having to come to you folks, because we're required to make it 0. Now, doesn't mean we can't carry the balances forward, but either way, that's a discussion. So meal counts. Well, first handout, if you take a look at the sheet, it says breakfast on the front, lunch on the back. What we did is
I've got
we
it.
went through
Yeah,
and
thank you.
compared last year when it was a
Yeah,
free
thanks.
year to a non-free year. And you can see, on the first, the breakfast, the total number of meals served for all the schools was 195,705, and we had 175 serving days. The next block down, which was this year, we did 103,177 breakfasts for 177 serving days. So we're down 92,000 meals just in breakfast. Okay. Flip over, same thing, 175 serving days, we did 489,002 meals. This year, 343,441 for 177 serving days. We're down 145,561 meals. So that equates to, when you compare the change, breakfast is down 47% and lunch is down 30%. If we compare to the last real year of pay, which is 18-19, to 22-23, breakfast is down 10%, lunch is down 7%. We all know going to the grocery store, cost of food is up. And we have not changed the meal prices at all.
Since when?
So the high school went up, I think 3 years ago, from $3 to $3.50. And then it's probably been 6 years since we went up a quarter, and you're gonna see a proposal to go up a quarter at 2 levels. And mostly that'll be on another sheet that I'm gonna show you in a minute. So, meal prices. So this is what the meal prices were this year at breakfast, and we're proposing no change at breakfast. For lunch, we're proposing, based on the paid equity tool, and I'll explain, going from $2.50 to $2.75 at the elementary, and $2.75 to $3 at the middle, and leaving the high school the same.
Jack, tell us a little more, excuse me, about what these changes will actually mean on a printout like this next year.
I mean, you're gonna sell fewer meals, bottom line.
We're gonna sell fewer-
You're gonna sell fewer meals. But
Excuse me.
when the Obama administration revised the 1946 National School Lunch Program, part of the thing that went in there is now this paid equity tool. And what it does a calculation to make sure that your free and reduced isn't subsidizing your paid students. So what it does is it requires us to run a calculation and determine what the price needs to be. So based on our calculation, that's why we think we need to go up a quarter.
So that we're not going back and taking money from the free and reduced.
And is that a federal requirement?
Yes.
Okay.
Or you can leave the price lower and then taxpayers pay the difference.
In terms of our deficit, can you just explain how, if at all, St. John's, how they play into fixing the deficit or the surplus? Because they're down significantly,
Yeah.
as they're down by 50%, it
Yeah.
looks like.
Yep.
So do they have to contribute towards that, or?
Yeah, so what happens is we run a calculation for them, because they pick up a portion of the courier, they pick a portion of the supply, whatever their supply stuff, they have their own accounts.
Yep.
And then they have to run break even, plus they pay a $1,600 fee.
Okay, so they didn't run break even, so they will have to make up
Correct.
break
And
even.
all their student debt needs to be zero.
Okay, thank
So
you.
the school will pick that up if they don't collect. We've been serving them since before I was here, it just has been.
Jeff, what do we get reimbursed for a free lunch?
For a free lunch.
Yeah, what's this reimbursement?
I should have gave her that sheet, but it's,
Yeah, it's
you know,
like-
for breakfast from the state, I think it's 3 cents. From the federal government, it's, I'm not gonna guess, I'll present it next
I
time.
feel like we
because the
had
rates
that
change every
sheet
year.
not too long
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, and I could have pulled the one up from 2 years.
Because that's where the
ago.
differential is.
Yeah,
Because they give us X amount of money per lunch. I think it's $3 and something now, okay, from the feds for their lunch. So we have to have a delta that's more equitable, and that's why the prices have to go up.
and you are seeing states move into
Yeah.
free lunch, they're not waiting for the federal government. The big thing we discuss is then how to use the entitlement grant. How do you get the free and reduced numbers in order to help with adequacy and Title I? The food goes through the whole chain, that's the problem. It's already tough enough getting them.
I think our legislature looked at that this year, but didn't move on it. So free lunches for everyone.
Do
So-
we have any indication that if we raise the prices, that students won't be eating?
Well, K-8, you feed them regardless.
Right.
High school is where we shut them off,
Right.
under the policy. No, I might as well go right into the debt, because that, you're gonna see there's the number. And the only thing we have recourse to do is to take them to small claims court, which we have not done. But you can, what that's saying is in the free, free, reduced and paid, that's their status, that's how much debt is in each of those.
How is their debt, and if free, is it like add-ons, that there's
Yeah,
debt?
correct. They go up and get a milk, it's not covered, correct.
Milk isn't included in lunch?
Well, if they just go up and get a milk, no, they have to
Oh.
get the whole meal.
They have to get the whole
In order
meal.
for it to be a reimbursable meal.
Okay.
I just would hate to think of kids not eating at any level, high school or not, because of a quarter.
If you add the high school, my guess, that Runlet number, times that by 2, that's what would happen at the high school.
And in terms of is there outreach to encourage the families where there's debt to apply for the free and reduced meal?
Every week.
Okay.
There's no recourse if they don't, I mean, that's the thing. We have never executed your policy that says we can take them to small claims court.
We should review that policy.
No. Jack, for the high school, if their account is negative,
Mhm.
can they still buy lunch?
Yeah, they pay cash, yeah.
Yeah, but there's no way that they can keep going negative, no?
No, after 2 weeks, we shut up the high school.
Okay.
So that policy number is 326, feel free to take a look at it, and I don't know what you think as far as changes, but this is the biggest I've seen it since I've been here. And we had it down to between 7 and 15,000, and it's really ballooned. But you see they're in a paid status, and if they are, they don't qualify. But again, at elementary level, we feed them. Oh, elementary and middle, K-8, we feed them.
And K-8 just gets set meals, or can, like,
There's no alternate meals. They get
6 to
whatever.
8, if they were to grab 2 slices of pizza and a soda and bring it up, that's not getting, we would say, no, I'm sorry, you're in a negative number. Because here's my thing, I want them to have an adequate meal, but I don't want them going à la carte and subbing things in that isn't a healthy meal just because they like pizza every day and Mountain Dew. I mean, and I don't know if that occurs,
Well,
but I would just
Mountain
want
Dew
to
is
make
not
sure.
on the menu.
Okay.
Just gonna ask.
Well, thank you,
About
yes,
that,
but
Pizza is, so.
pizza and whatever else.
Pizza, breakfast for lunch.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're feeding, if we are paying for their debt, we are feeding them a healthy, nutritious meal, because that's what our goal is here. I would never want to take a meal away from a kid, especially not K-8, but I want to make sure they're eating healthy. And I don't know the process, and maybe, there is a huge process that prevents that from happening. I just wanted to ask the question.
I'll get your clarity on it, but I know that they do their best to try to make it a reimbursable meal, so at least you're getting your
Yeah.
39 cents on a paid meal.
Yeah.
But, obviously, once they pick the stuff up and take it, unless if it's like a soda, because that's sealed, but once they have it in their hand, it's kind of hard, But everything we sell is reimbursable. What matters next is what's the drink,
Okay. So that we won't need to satisfy by year end. Doesn't mean we can't say, roll that over and you keep it on their balance. What I don't know is whether we're allowed to charge interest on those funds or not. I don't know. It's very regulated.
What percentage of that number is people who are no longer in the district? Because you can't roll those
I
over.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Do we actually offer a cash option, or is it only the online?
It's card.
No, they can pay cash at the middle school and the high school. Cash is a little tougher at the elementary because they queue them up.
Yeah, no,
But, no,
very
they can
well
pay cash.
organized. I guess one of the problems that I have with our school lunch payment solution is that every time you deposit money into your child's account, you have to pay a fee. So for a family that can afford to put in more at once, they pay fewer dollars in fees, but it's, no matter how much you put in, it's $260 every time you deposit in your kid's account. So if you're a family that can only afford to put in that week's lunch money, we're charging a lot in fees. And that bothers me, and I don't know what our solution
You
is.
could shut it off and everybody pays it. Meaning, we pay for everybody.
Well, what would that be in fees?
You can get a number.
Are we paying that company or no? Is it just,
No, that's all passed through, so it comes out of the amounts that
Okay.
we get our money and then the fee is the company.
Okay.
But you can, if you decided, nope, the district will pick up the cost of processing credit card fees, you can,
they
almost
also
positive you can elect to do that.
charged the last day of school, so, automatically. So if people didn't shut off, they took the money if you had a replenishment amount. They did it, yes. And I thought I had shut it off, but that's a different story.
Well, tomorrow,
So,
we're shutting the credit card system off, so you won't be able to go on and pay tomorrow.
So when families buy lunches, they do it through a credit card?
They can do it through their credit card, or they can link it to their checking account, which is cheaper.
What if they don't have either?
Then they pay cash. They can send cash into.
They can send cash
Yeah,
still
we
in the
have a card that goes
envelopes. I
around.
remember
Yeah,
the
yeah.
envelope.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
they
can
can
do
still
that.
do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
At the elementary school?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Mhm.
I don't know that that's presented as an option.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is
Definitely
there,
sounds like we have some opportunity for communication to parents.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. And then finally, the last handout. Oh, not that one. You should see one that says Concord School District Debt Service. Okay. So I took a snapshot as of June, okay? Show you each of the items and how we class them a little differently, based on the type of debt it is. So if you take a look at this sheet, it shows you right now a 2022 tax year, the valuation for those living in this Concord school, the value of the properties in the Concord School District, 4.6 billion. You go under there with the description, you see Runlet HVAC project. I labeled that as capital number 1, because that was the first project that we assigned this one and the elementary consolidation as it relates for your trust fund. I'll explain that in a minute. The original issue was 4.3 million. It was funded in 2010. That will be paid off in September of 2026. That is the debt payment for this year, and then we get a rebate from the federal government of 62,000. That's the net debt payment. So at 6 cents per thousand on the local school rate, that debt costs $18 a year on a $300,000 home. So if you take each of the debts that are here listed here, the total on a $300,000 home, you're paying $225 towards these items here annually.
but what is it total when you consider the 5%,
$108 more.
$108 more, thank you.
And that 5%, what that counts is capital. So we do the differential between 5% of your general fund budget and the Runlet HVAC and the elementary consolidation. That's when it had started.
So Jack, this document is changing all the time, right? I mean,
Every year,
based on what
the
things
debt goes down every year.
get paid and,
Yeah. That's the nice part about the equal principal structure. So that you're able to generate that savings. And again, you earmark 5%, which is a good practice
Right.
for us, and it's a reasonable number. And it equalizes things across the board and allows you to have these savings that when you go to the bond market and they see you have savings account for these projects. And when you go to do, you saw when I put the bond schedule up, I took some of the 10 million in your trust and you even out the number. That's what's allowing you to do that. Otherwise, if you don't have that, you're looking at what, $641 increase the first year for 5% of the budget.
sometimes I ask questions just to have you tell people the answer.
No,
Sometimes I really don't know.
been around long enough, you understand, and sometimes you forget. Any questions about this? That's all I have unless you have questions.
Does anyone have anything else?
Perfect timing.
On that note,
His iPad isn't working.
Emergency.
that's right.
Anyone have any else for Jack or the superintendent or any other topics that you would like to discuss? In that case, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Hastings, seconded by Mr. Croteau. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is